See, I have to say, we get excited about all of our podcasts, but I'm particularly giddy about this one, given the man we're talking to and the date that we're talking to him.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But Bobby, thank you for doing this at what I am absolutely positive is the most chaotic, busy time of year for you. We are on the brink of free agency starting. Literally, this podcast released Thursday morning, and Thursday night it starts. So thank you, Bobby, for doing this, man.
I appreciate it. I'm glad I could find some time. I feel like I'm like a doctor scheduling appointments today, right? It's like I was getting so many requests. I'm like, no, I think I can do it 2 weeks from today, And stuff. If you could just see so my schedule, if you could just see it, there's like 9 things on it and stuff. And barring anything breaking news, and I think if this was tomorrow on the 30th of June, I'd be like, yeah, there might be a little bit tight.
Yeah.
we can figure it out. I think if Kyrie had not opted in yet, I would have probably said to Ryan and CC, I think we need to just wait. Just give me a little bit. Can we do it at midnight?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I know, man. I felt the same way. It actually ends up working out perfectly. Go for it, C.
No, I was just going to say what's crazy about NBA free agency is that it's already happening now.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We get the news on Thursday night, but everything's already planned out because at 12:01 everybody will start signing. It's awesome.
You know what it's like? It's like everyone's saying, well, they're tampering. And I said, well, how many times, if you're doing 30 and a 25 when you're driving, how many times are you going to get pulled over? Right? now, if you do, 55 and a 25, you're going to get pulled over and everything. So, it's I think that's the only way that you can kind of go about doing your business and stuff is try to line up things now, as long as you're not, we saw last year, the Lonzo Ball sign and trade was the first deal that came off the board at 6 o'clock. Right.
Yeah.
And, those are, as those are complicated to do, sign and trade. So the league is like, well, wait a minute, or Kyle Lowry, the league will look at that. But I think you just got to be careful as far as how you go about kind of your business here. As far as you can talk to, you certainly can talk to agents. Certainly if agents have players on your own team that represent another free agent, you're not going to kind of go in there. But, a good example is Danilo Gallinari's got a partial guarantee in his contract. And if you're the Hawks, you're trying to talk to him and his agent as far as maybe you're amending that, or maybe you can use it in a deal or some other things there. So you can bend, but as far as don't break the rules here.
Yeah, it's got to be it's got to be so interesting walking that line, because obviously we all know things are getting done, because otherwise you wouldn't have the flurry of deals you have at 12:01, right? There has to be conversations happening, but it wouldn't also serve the league for them not to happen, because then you wouldn't have the incredible jolt of activity that you do. In this case, 6 p.m. rather than midnight, which, by the way, Bobby, I think that in itself is telling of how aware the league is of itself as an entertainment property, right? Because rather than making everyone be night owls, hey, you're going to get way more activity and eyeballs, not to mention it's just going to be easier on the executives, right? Bumping it up to 6 p.m.
It used to be midnight, right?
Right,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I first started here at ESPN, it was midnight. Because I remember we were, part of our, I guess I could say it because I don't think I'm breaking any rules. Part of our agreement, as far as, coming from Yahoo, for me at least, was that, there was no breaking news until we started our contract, which started on July 1st. And it was at midnight. And the Paul George trade happened he went from Indiana to Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. And so you're just kind of sitting on information, right? You're just, you're waiting for the clock to hit midnight. But nowadays, you move it up to 6 o'clock. We've got TV shows centered around it. I think NBA Today is going twice, Thursday and Friday, with shows. And it's more of, the entertainment value of it, because by 4th of July, unless there's something really that's, in a holding pattern here, most of free agency is all but done.
Yeah, which is awesome. Like you said, you can just program around it and it keeps fans engaged. Last week you had the draft, and it just keeps the momentum throughout the summer of your basketball engagement. And, I think that's something that baseball, me and Ryan always talk about. I think baseball needs to look into that just to keep their, the momentum going in their offseason and keep fans engaged.
Because one of the things we talk about in that regard, Bobby, is like, if we were to say to you like, hey, here's a show coming out that you're interested in. Well, when are the episodes going to drop? Well, there could be one on Thursday, and then in 3 weeks you might get one on a Tuesday, and then you might get 3 straight days. It's like it's hard to get excited. Whereas, if you're like, you either know exactly when things are happening, or there's a flurry of like, hey, all of Ozark is out. Boom, I can go binge it, right? Like, I think that's where the NBA gets it right. You have this very concentrated period of activity. I know I can engage myself and immerse myself in it.
Yeah, I think the only thing, though, I would probably maybe look into is maybe we reverse doing free agency first and then maybe have the draft. So it kind of like almost like the NFL does it that way.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is that, and it's just from being involved in the draft for 5 years now, the night of the draft gets confusing for people who are watching it on TV. Who's getting traded? Who's got what team is Jalen Durant going to the Knicks? Is he going to Charlotte? Is he going to Detroit? So, and the NBA is so reluctant on announcing trades until they become official, until they go through the legal process here. And the night of the draft, what happens is you're still operating under the old calendar year, right? So calendar year goes July 1 to June 30. The new calendar year starts. So if you have a trade that you can't do until July 6th, then it's not going to be announced officially here. So I think just for the sake of just cleaning up the process, you would love to see trades being announced. If you're a viewer at home, who's going where? Like the year that Anthony Davis was traded to from New Orleans to the Lakers, like that draft was so confusing because like DeAndre Hunter basically had like 4 different hats, right? I got a Pelicans hat. I got a Lakers hat. I got a Hawks hat, right? Mikal Bridges is the same thing. I had a Sixer hat. Now I got a Suns hat, right? So it just gets a little bit, I think it gets a little bit, the NFL is different because there's not rarely do you see trades that are involving players.
Right.
Draft. It's more about the picks and everything, where here the NBA is a little more player centric.
Do you think, Bobby, would flipping the order solve for that if you just had free agency first?
I think moving adjusting the calendar year so the draft happens during the new calendar year and not kind of on the back end. I think it's just a matter of just kind of adjusting the dates.
Got you. There's so many things to dive into with you, whether it's like some specific things that have happened or could be on the brink of happening. And then just, the general perspective and experience that you had being in, an NBA front office for 2 decades, and now obviously in the role that you're in now with ESPN. I guess because you just mentioned it, and this might be a little niche, but it's so interesting to me. Sign and trade scenarios, right? Like you were someone who was one of your skill sets was being a capologist, so to speak, right? So you're trying to figure out all the financial aspects of making something work. When you're looking at this and things can't become official yet, right? And there's different permutations. How are you actually keeping yourself organized when it comes to potential sign and trades? And how are you actually finding out what is possible and what is not? What is actually something you can execute and what is not?
Well, I mean, sign and trades used to be a lot easier for a lot of different reasons. When LeBron and Chris Bosh and that group went to Miami in 2010, the rules were different because they could have signed, they were signed and traded, and they made basically the same amount of money that if they were signing with Cleveland or Toronto, their former teams, like they could get the full 5 years and the percentage increase. So they weren't leaving any money on the table. The other thing too was that back then there was no hard cap. Right. Like we've been talking about this hard cap, certainly with the Kyrie Irving situation going on, like, well, how come the Lakers can't get him or how come the Clippers can't get him? Because what the league did was they tried to restrict player movement when it comes to sign and trades, whether it be if you're in a sign and trade, it's basically you're almost going at the same number as you would be signing with a team in free agency. So you can't sign for 5 years. It's got to be 4 years. So it's less money. So you're basically leaving like $40, $50 million on the table to do a sign and trade. the hard cap was implemented here because it triggers things. Like they don't want teams to keep on adding money here. So if you're a team like the Lakers, let's say the hard cap's $157 million and 157, and you already got $155 million committed, right? You can't exceed that in a sign and trade. Okay. So it gets a little complicated. I did like a YouTube video the other day, trying to like explain. I went back to school and did like a video. It was the craziest part of these videos is that like I try to make it fun. And I had basically my laptop on top of a garbage can because I didn't have a prop. And I had a whiteboard, and I do this 20-minute video, and it's confusing as heck. And then I start looking at the screen, and when you look at something, all the words are backwards, right? Like when you look at the mirror, I'm like,
gosh.
holy crap! I just did this video. Well, here's the thing. And so I go, you know what? I got to do another video, blah, blah, blah. Fair enough. Like when you watch the video, it actually was normal, right? So I did these 15-minute videos, just explaining kind of the intricacies of the hard cap and base year compensation and why it's going to be hard. And, certainly we're going to see like good example is going to be DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix, right? Like, so what happens with Ayton? He's a restricted free agent. The Suns have the right to match on any offer sheet. The cap space is not there, right? We saw it with Kyrie. There's it's Detroit. Well, maybe not even Detroit anymore after this Knicks deal. It's like Indiana and it's San Antonio. It's Orlando.
Does Memphis have any cap space, Bobby?
Well, they could, but it would cost them probably Tyus Jones. Okay. So that's kind of a priority there.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're Ayton and you can't get the right offer from the Suns, you got to find a trade partner, or you have to go find one of these teams that will sign you to an offer sheet and then have Phoenix match it, right? Because they can't just lose them for nothing. So, I mean, and that's why, going back to the conversation, like if agents are talking, like, you have to, you can't just wait until June 30th at 6 p.m. Like, okay, let's go. Start business. You're basically everybody's going to be lapping you, right? Around the field here and everything.
But how about, Bobby, to get into one of the specific things you just mentioned, Kyrie opting in. Let's deal with this aspect of it first. Is there, in your eyes, any chance that he is still dealt in the aftermath of the opt-in?
It's hard. I think it's hard for me to see it in the off season.
Okay.
I think the only way if he's eventually moved is things go south in Brooklyn during the season.
Okay.
I think, if they get off to a bad start, because what's going to happen is we kind of remove a little bit of the drama of what would have happened this week. I think Armageddon was going to be coming to Brooklyn if Kyrie had opted out and then gone to the Lakers for $7 million. Just play that scenario, because I think, as we've said, like it starts a domino effect here. So now if you're Kevin Durant,
right, and
you're looking at, wait a minute, I came to Brooklyn in 2019 to win a championship. Kyrie's gone. I don't know what I got in Ben Simmons. Okay. Joe Harris is coming off an injury. Like, what else is here? So I think we would have heard the Durant talks as far as him maybe not being happy. I think what happens is CC knows this, like, when you're in the offseason, like it's the honeymoon period, right? Like nobody's playing games. Like you haven't lost 6 games in a row, and you're not looking at your roster, be like, man, like I need another shooting guard here. So we are in this little bit of a honeymoon period, but I think what will happen is anytime a guy's on an all-star's on an expiring contract, and if your team's not playing well and you're struggling here, and there's the risk of maybe losing him for nothing as an unrestricted free agent, because the market will get considerably better next offseason with teams that are going to have money to spend. Like it will be a lot better here. And so I don't think the cloud over Brooklyn has certainly been removed. I think it'll be interesting as far as what they do in free agency and how they keep on building this roster here. But yeah, I mean, I think just for Kyrie, whenever you have a guaranteed $36.5 million on the table to go back to, I mean, it was a smart financial decision, and they could always work out a deal during the year. He could always be extended during the year. There's no restriction date on that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think down the road, that's probably a situation to watch. Probably not right now.
I definitely think that they need to do some things in free agency to get better and get off to a good start. Like, it's imperative that they get off to a good start, because if not, then you're just going to hear all the rumblings. And outside noise affects Brooklyn, you know what I'm saying, more than any other team. Whether it's KD tweeting back at the new meet, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I saw Kyrie with Stephen A, right?
All of those things. So all of those things affect them. So they need to get off to a good basketball start so that they don't hear that shit, and then they can just go out and play, and then they'll be fine. But
I know,
if they get off to a rough start, I think it's going to be tough in Brooklyn, man. I think a lot of those guys are going to be moving by the All-Star break if they don't get off to a good start.
You know, it's funny, like, you know, if you look at 2019 and if you had the opportunity to sign Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, all 30 GMs, and not give up anything for them,
right?
Every GM would have raised their hand and said, I will do it here.
Yeah.
Now, you know, and with that comes, you know, with the expectations, probably a little more maintenance here. And there's times when I'm thinking, like, man, I wonder if Sean Marks, their general manager, like is watching TV at night and thinking, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen.
Man, I was just thinking.
So you know what? 43 wins, first round.
Much easier life.
I could sleep a lot better, you know, like that. But it's hard. I mean, because roster building is hard. I mean, it's one thing to go out and make a trade and go out and sign a player, but it's the maintenance of it, right? It's like like I always say, like the head coach, it's you know, 40% of their job is X's and O's. The other part is managing
personalities.
Like 15 different personalities here.
Yep.
Yeah. Bobby, there's two things I want to ask you about that. Like, one is a more evergreen sort of general thing about how you balance that organizational control with stars. But before I get to that, because C just brought it up, free agency wise, you know, roster configuration wise, assuming now Kyrie and KD are going to be back, at least to give it a go the first half of the season and see how things go, right? Is there anything out there right now for Brooklyn that you see as serious augmentation to the roster? Because it does feel like it feels like there's not going to be let's just run it back and be healthy. It feels like some things are going to happen with the roster, but I don't know what those are. Is there anything on the table for you that you think, okay, that's a target, or this is an area where they should be going to try and, you know, help service those stars?
I think there's going to be a shift in philosophy where we saw last year they signed more of the older veterans to some of these, you know, smaller contracts, whether it be Blake, LaMarcus Aldridge, James Johnson, DeAndre Bembry, Javon. Like there was a list of them here. Yeah. I think, you know, certainly the priority will be Nick Claxton, who's a restricted free agent. We'll see what happens with Bruce Brown. We're taping this on Wednesday. We'll have a decision on Patty Mills, who's got a player option.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your focus for those three guys, right? And then it's a matter of like, all right, we've got the $6.5 million tax mid-level. Who can we go out and get with that? We've got these trade exceptions for $11 and $6 million. Who could we target in a trade? Not a free agent, but a player under contract. And then the other thing is that when you did the Harden trade back in February, you got 2 first-round picks, one in 2023, the other in 2027. Are those picks expendable? Knowing that there might be a little bit of uncertainty down the road with Irving and maybe Durant. So I think those will all be certainly factors as far as how they, you know, build out the roster here. I think the other thing will be interesting too is like, I think a year ago and 2 years ago, Brooklyn, I think, was probably a little bit more of a destination for free agents.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, when you have a lot of drama and there's a lot going on here, you know, and you're looking at, you know what, I can go Brooklyn, Golden State, Milwaukee, the Clippers, right? They all have the same amount of money that they can offer me. Where am I going to go? Can I just go play with Giannis in Milwaukee?
Right.
There's not much drama there. You know, can I go to Golden State? There's not much drama there unless, you know, you consider Draymond drama, but that's basically outside of the, I mean, we just won a championship. I'm going to go take $2 million compared to Brooklyn for $2 million. And we saw a little, you know, when Blake went there and LaMarcus and then the buyout, like Brooklyn was a destination. And I think it's still, I think on paper, they're starting 5. I'll roll out that starting 5 against anybody on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me those 5. I don't know what it looks like playing wise, but nowadays, like, I think it'll be interesting because Brooklyn and the Lakers and the Clippers, there's like 10 or 11 teams that are basically going to be competing for the same type of players. And when the dust settles in a week or 2 weeks, I'm interested to see kind of who they sign.
You know, that to me, Bobby, has been an underrated part of this. Like last year, right? Like you had KD actively recruiting, right? Like you felt like they were on the brink of a title. And so it helps get Patty Mills. If they were sort of removed, then all of a sudden you don't necessarily have the same probably recruiting effort plus feeling from the free agent. And I actually thought about you because I thought about, now you were a different case because you were, a free agent who was about to set records for, largest contract ever for a pitcher, et cetera, when you were a free agent in 08. But what was important to you? You wanted to make sure that the clubhouse with the Yankees, which had been oft talked about, wasn't as messy as it seemed to be, right? Like that was a priority for you.
Oh yeah, it was just all about like the least drama as possible. You know what I'm saying? So out of all those places that Bobby just named, I mean, I'm going with the least amount of drama. So that's probably Milwaukee. You know what I'm saying? The least amount of media coverage, like all of that stuff. And I can get the same amount of money and play with, a guy and still have a chance to win the championship. That's where I'm going.
And how about, I have a question, CC, for you. So if you're going through this recruiting process, you're an NBA player and LeBron calls you, AD calls you, Giannis calls you, Paul George, Kawhi, they call you, say, hey, like, we only got $2 million, but this is what we can be. We add you, I think we can get to an NBA finals here, or you get nothing, right? No call from Durant, no call for Irving. It's basically the general manager who is communicating through your agent. Like, how much does that play into effect also?
Oh, that's huge. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're getting personal calls from players, like, you feel like you're wanted. You know what I'm saying? So other than, if it's LeBron calling, or like you said, if it's Paul George calling, or like how the guys pulled up in KD in the Hamptons, you know what I'm saying? Like you feel like you feel like you want to be a part of that team. So yeah, I mean that makes a huge, huge difference.
That's one thing I've thought about as far as their situation goes, and how it
are
might
those
happen.
guys, is KD not out actively recruiting right now, or is that?
I think it's a lot different than it was a year ago when you're out recruiting Patty Mills, or you're out recruiting 2 years ago, as far as guys that
Aldridge,
you're looking.
Blade,
And to be honest, like guys that I have relationships with, right? Like, say if I was an NBA player, and me and Adam Jones are real close, and I'm like, yo, Adam, come play with me in Brooklyn, but I don't know if I'm gonna be here in 6 months. I wouldn't even put him through that, or his family through that.
Or you're thinking,
so I wouldn't even call him. You know what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't call my close friends to come play with me in a place where I know, if I didn't know where, that I was certain to be here the next couple of years.
Well, and the other thing is too is like, especially if you have a family and you're going there thinking like, well, wait a minute, like I'll be there until December 15th when you're eligible to be traded. Like, am I going to be traded? Am I going to be part of one of these packages? Like I think the stability, I mean, and anybody can be traded anywhere, but I think the stability factor I think it's got some, certainly some cracks in it.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Bobby, just to put a bow on the Brooklyn thing, because you're talking about, by the way, my daughter Evie, as you may be able to hear, she's very excited about the NBA free agency starting, as you can hear. She is all about it, right, Evie? Yeah. This is her first free agency, so understandably so. My question is this, just put a bow on it, Bob, because you talked about using the 23 or 27 picks from Philly, right? Which I don't think have any protections on them, do they? The
later pick is protected, I think, like top 7. The one next year is unprotected.
Yeah, so like if Embiid got hurt and the Philly thing blows up, it could be a great pick. If they're all healthy, obviously it wouldn't be that high. But the way I look at it is I'm like, look, like if I'm the Nets, I'm using any draft capital I can at this point to augment around those stars, because if it doesn't work, I have Kevin Durant under contract for 4 years. I can go get back any draft capital I want, in theory, that I'm going to deal at this point, right? And without bottoming out, because he gives you back that kind of a haul. Like if you're all of a sudden at the deadline and your team's 5 games under 500 and it's an internal mess again, and you're like, look, you can trade Durant and Kyrie, maybe even Simmons, and you could probably build a team that's still, competing for the playoffs and then also has the draft capital. Do you think I'm thinking about that
No,
in
you're
the right
right.
way?
I mean,
Yeah.
no, you're right. I mean, it's kind of similar, but certainly LeBron and AD are probably not going to be traded. Where if you're the Lakers, you're thinking, well, hey, I've got these two guys in their prime. I mean, prime of their career. My window to compete for a championship is now. What does a 2027 and the 2029 first round pick mean?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're Brooklyn, like I always like, I was getting texts and people that are thinking do you think the Nets will let KD walk for nothing? And I'm thinking like, walk for nothing. The guy's under contract for 4 years, 190 million. Like he would, if you ever put him on the market in a trade, like say Kevin Durant is now available to be traded, you would have, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say 29 teams, but I would say like you'd be better off moving to Seattle or Vegas if you ever traded him to the Knicks. Like, so I'll remove.
True.
I know Knicks fans are going to be mad at me, but like, hey, I worked in New Jersey. I get it being the little brother to the big brother here.
Yeah.
I get it here. So if you ever put KD on the market and you knew you were getting him for 4 years, like Sacramento, Minnesota, right? Like all these teams that would never be able, he doesn't have a no trade clause. You would be able to get a haul as far as what you can get back.
Yeah.
Wait, he doesn't have a no trade clause, KD?
He doesn't. No, the rules in the NBA are really, there's nobody in the NBA that has a no trade clause. You've got to be in the league for 8 years and with the same team for 4. So, and then example, like Bradley Beal, I believe he will opt out and sign probably a big contract with the Wizards. Will be eligible to put a no trade clause in his contract. We'll see if that happens. He should be smart to do it. I think if you have the ability and you're a marquee guy, I think you almost have to, because then you can. It's almost like baseball, where if you you can give you have 6 teams put in your contract as far as where you can you can be traded to.
Baseball is 10 and 5.
Yeah.
10 years, 5 with the same team. Yeah.
Right. And then you automatically sort of have that list, right?
It's in there. Yeah, it's automatic.
Which is just
the
crazy.
The one thing, so if you have a guy, so if Kyrie had opted out and then signed back in Brooklyn for a year, he would have had, it wouldn't have been an official no trade clause, but because he was signing a 1-year contract, he could have had veto power on any deal.
Wow, that's fascinating, Bobby. How do you keep all these rules straight? How do you? I don't know. How do you go through? You just go through so many different things. Like you just go through so many different situations. Like been doing this since 1995, and you just go through different scenarios. And I don't have a researcher, so I just kind of do all my own stuff. And so yeah, I just kind of, and the rules are they're gonna change again in
all
a
the time.
year. Yeah, I mean they change basically every 4 years. Luckily, it's been kind of an amendment to the CBA. Like the CBA that came into effect in 2011 was basically a new version. It was basically like reading a new chapter. When the CBA was amended in 2017, it was really just tweaked when we added like the Supermax and some other new rules. And I think the next CBA will be basically, a little bit of a tweak here. I don't think we'll have an overhaul here, but 2011, when we got this new CBA, it was like we had the lockout, and the lockout got lifted. We were, locked out from July, locked the players out from July 1, and then it got resolved right around Thanksgiving. They basically gave teams a week to learn the CBA before free agency started, to the point where you didn't like the hard cap. For us in New Jersey, we were always a team that really didn't spend money. The hard cap didn't impact us. And Ryan could relate to this. So in 2012, when Darren Williams resigned and we traded for Joe Johnson and Gerald Wallace and all these guys. So we went from a team that was under the salary cap. Now we're a luxury tax team, right? So now your exceptions are limited. So now you don't have the full $8 million exception. Now you have a smaller exception here. So if you use the full one, then it triggers the hard cap here. So I remember Darren Williams had committed to us. I remember because I was basically the only one in the building. I'm sitting in East Rutherford in my office. It's like 4th of July. He commits to us, and Billy King calls me and he says, all right, we got Darren, and we're going to commit to Mirza Teletovic for the full mid-level exception. 4 years, $30 million, right? Great. Got a shooter, small power forward, right? So I'm sitting there like 10 minutes later and I'm thinking like, holy shit, we can't, because it would trigger the hard cap and it would basically lose us like Chris Humphries. It would basically lose us like 4 players.
Yeah.
So now I got to call the NBA, call the legal department. And I said like, hey, I think I know the answer to this. And they're like, yeah, like you can sign him, but this is what will happen. And I remember calling Billy. It was like it was like basically calling like your wife after you just got in like a fight, whatever. Like you're just sitting there thinking like, all right, like will the situation go away? Will it just all right, how do I phrase this? And then finally I said to him, Billy, well, we got an issue. We can only offer Mears a 3 years, 10 million, and not 3 years, whatever, 30 million. And he's like, well, why? And I was like, well, the hard cap. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's in the new CBA, but it was such a crash course that we never thought we would ever be in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know how it got resolved. I'll leave it there for that, but
somehow it did.
but yeah, so you're constantly just, you're constantly just learning, and then trying to do this while you're doing TV and use a touch screen like the weatherman.
Yeah.
Playing. And like, for me, it's always been like, I remember with talking with our producers here is like, you can't just say tax mid-level exception. People at home have no idea what the tax mid-level exception is. Right. You can't just say the hard cap. You got to explain it in like 20 seconds as far as to simplify things where someone wants to come back and watch, maybe how the money works and all that.
It's funny because one of the terms you brought up, Bobby, was trade exceptions. And when you're talking about what the Nets can use. And I actually just wanted to ask you, because I'm sure fans right now are hearing that term. And even for me, someone who's intimately involved with the NBA, obviously, and also I have a CBA background, so to speak, because my father worked for the NFL league office for 34 years. And that's what he did, and he was, one of the crafters of the cap. And even me, when it comes to trade exceptions, I'm like, wait, I don't fully grasp it. So can you give us all sort of a crash course on how trade exceptions can be used? Yeah. I mean, it's basically like, it's a trade chip, right? Like just consider it like, so if you trade, let's say, if you trade a team, if you're a team that has a $17 million player, okay? And you trade him to a team that has salary cap space. Okay. You're not taking back salary. Right. Now you got a trade exception of 17 million. That you can exceed the cap with. You have it for a whole year. However, trade exceptions, you're not allowed to acquire a player and a sign and trade that you are going to exceed the hard cap. So for example, the Celtics, right? They did the Evan Fournier last year to New York. And a sign and trade, right? The Knicks could have just signed him outright, but they wanted to create this trade exception. So Boston's got this $17 million trade exception that they're sitting on right now. They're right at the hard cap. It hasn't been triggered, but they can't go out and get Tyus Jones from the Grizzlies in a sign and trade. Because it would trigger the hard cap? It would trigger the hard cap. So basically the best way to look at it is it's basically kind of the difference in salary on how the trade exception is created. So if you're trading a $17 million guy for a $6 million guy, or let's say a $17 million guy for a $13 million guy, and it works, you're basically going to create a trade exception of like $4 million. Got you. So there's only like 30 of them that are available here in the NBA. Like the Nets have a trade exception of 11 million from the Dinwiddie trade to the Wizards. And that when he went there last year, because the Nets didn't take any salary back. So basically, it's that amount.
But Bobby, it can't exceed the hard cap. It can't.
Well, if it's a player that's already under contract. So if Brooklyn wants to go out and trade for Terrence Ross, who plays in Orlando and is under contract, they can go out and trade for him. Okay. You cannot acquire a free agent. And a sign and trade, because then the hard cap triggers. Gotcha. And then you can't exceed it. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense. How about Bobby? Are the trade exemptions also exempt from luxury tax implications? Like if I'm already a luxury tax team and I acquire Terrence Ross, am I still going to be paying, 3 to 1 or depending on where I am in the taxpayer? Okay. Gotcha. Like that's what Golden State went through that the year that Clay got hurt the second time is that we all thought that, what's Golden State doing? They had a trade exception, I think, of like $15 million, and they went out and got Kelly Oubre, who was under contract already in Phoenix, and it cost them like $80 million for one guy for one season here. Because he was already under contract. If Oubre was a free agent, they wouldn't have been able to go out and do a deal like that.
So this is what's so fascinating to me, guys. Like, so that conversation, right? Bobby, if you're in the front office and you're having that conversation with your owners, right, where you're like, look, Kelly Oubre clearly is not an $80 million player, but he might be critical for us achieving what we want to achieve, and we've already sunk in this amount of money, right? Like, there are so many teams. The Warriors have been willing to pay whatever, but not to keep bringing it back to the Nets, is Joe Tsai? Are you going to go to him and say, hey, Joe, we want to use this cap exemption for Terrence Ross, but instead of it costing us, I'm just making up a number, 11 million, it's going to cost us 33. Like, how do you have those conversations, Bobby, where, like, do you actually say, look, because it's not your money, it's theirs, right? But it's like, look, with our restrictions and rules, if we're all in on this, we have to be all in to the point of, it doesn't matter if our tax bill is 200 or 100 million. Like, if we want to build this roster, like, what are those conversations like between front office and ownership when it comes to that kind of mindset of, like, are we all in on this or are we not?
Well, how about, and you also got swept in the first round.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
So we, the conversation. So in 2014, when Jason Kidd was our head coach, that was the year with Pierce and Garnett in that group there. And we started playing a lot better after the Christmas. It was when Brook Lopez had broke his foot, and we wound up putting Garnett at center, and Jason did a really good job. And so we're playing really good basketball. We had we're in a luxury tax. We had a trade exception of worth like $8 million. And there was a deal that we could have acquired Jordan Hill, who played, I think, for the Lakers at the time, power forward here. And so you look at it, and this is when you really get the coach involved, and you say, hey, we got to have a deal to go out and get Jordan Hill. It's going to cost us another $40 million for the next 33 months of the season. Ownership has already signed off on it, because what ownership is going to say is like, hey, if it can help your team, and is it going to help your team? Great, go ahead and do it. But there's a but to it, right? When that guy's not playing, or when, like, you lose, and like, well, then, like, yeah, hey. So we said to Jason, like, we can go out and do this. What do you? And he said to us, like, I don't know how much I can play. I don't know how much he's going to play. I don't know how many minutes I can give him. He's a great luxury for us. He's not a priority here. He could probably play in the playoffs, and we can do some things here. But so then you think, and then you meet, and you be like, well, how do you go back to ownership saying, like, we talked to the coach, and, there's no guarantee that, your $40 million that you're going to spend is going to be a good investment here. That's a hard conversation. I think you just have to be honest. And I think that's where you bring, certainly the coach into it.
How about, Bobby? If you could think of, like, is there any one particular story about this time of year that stands out most? If I ask you for a scenario where you thought for sure you had a player coming, and then all of a sudden you didn't.
Oh my God! So 2010, this is the first year that the Russian ownership group bought the team.
Yeah,
and so LeBron, Bosh, Wade, that free agent group, Amari Stoudemire, Joe Johnson, Carlos Boozer, and so we have, like, so they go to Cleveland to do their visits, right? LeBron, we were even first. Like, we like, this is when, like, iPads had just first come out, right? we got like these iPad, it's loaded up, and how you can become the first billionaire athlete and all these different things.
Didn't Jay-Z go for that pitch too?
You could be like Roger Federer and Tiger and all these things. So we go out there, and, like, we meet with, and I'm in our office, and I've got, like, these whiteboards, right? And I've got all these names up of free agents here. I'm, like, basically, like, sitting in the control tower trying to land the planes, right? So they meet with LeBron, and, like, they call, and, like, she's like, oh shit, like, shit, I think we got a chance here. I'm like, really? Yeah, we might need to clear money to get Bosch or Wade and stuff like that. So then you start moving things, right? Like, okay, I can move Chris Humphries, blah, 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 all these different scenarios. How do I get, 30 million back then was a lot of money. How do I get to 45 million to get these two guys? And you start going through it and you start thinking about it. And then you go to, they met with the Dwayne and Chris in Chicago. Both guys were late for the meeting. One of them had like I think Chris had like who was filming like a reality show. And then you're thinking like, oh my God, this is not real. Like we got no chance here. Right? But the problem is that, and this is when you have new ownership here, is that, so, all right, LeBron commits, wipe him off. Bosch commits, wipe him off. Amari goes to New York, wipe him off. Dwayne stays home, wipe him off. So now you're like looking at, holy God, we got all this money. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so Carlos Boozer, good player, Rob Pelinka represented him. And at the time, and Rob calls me and he's like, I think you can get Boozer 5 for 85. And that's pretty rich back then.
Yeah.
A rich contract. And this is before we had gone. This is before Darren,
yeah,
we were not very good.
Yeah.
Right? Like this, like we're playing in Newark, New Jersey. Like, I don't know about Carlos Boozer being, but then all the ownerships are looking like all-stars. So 5 for 85, but Carlos wants you to come to Florida and meet with him. He's talking to me. I'm like, shit, I'm the cap guy. Like I wouldn't talk. I don't know who, I know Carlos Boozer. He doesn't know who I am and stuff like that. So I said, Rod Thorne, who was our president, said we can get Boozer, blah, blah, blah. I think 5 for 85. Ownership signs off on it. Boozer goes to Chicago for like 5 for 70. I was so pissed.
What?
Like I was so pissed. And, they had a better team. And I called Rob and I was like uncharacteristic. I probably said some choice words, right?
Yeah.
And I was so pissed. And then what happens is, and this is just going through the experience here, then you just panic, right? So then you just go out and spend money on guys. I always say I call them the law firm of Farmar, Outlaw, Petro, could have been Tyrus Thomas, part of that group. And you're breaking up the money. You're signing guys for 3 years, 24 million, 2 years, 10 million. It's like basically just kind of balancing a checkbook here. And I think that's where you got to be careful when you miss out on guys that you think are going to get. I mean, we almost had Tyrus Thomas, who was in Charlotte for like 4 for 40, which was a lot of money then.
Yeah.
And we went out to lunch and we came back and his agent had called me. He's like, he's going to go back to Charlotte. And I was like, thank God.
It's so interesting, Bobby. That's one of the reasons. See, I feel like we've maybe talked about this at some points, but why I feel like the floor structure could be different when it comes to the NBA salary cap. And I don't know what it was at that time, Bobby, but like, having to hit a certain floor, right? But whereas the NFL does it over a longer period of time and you can carry over the cap space you haven't used to different years, the NBA is a more confined period of time. So it's like you're forced to spend money on players that you otherwise maybe wouldn't want to spend money. And then it could restrict you moving forward in your ability to get better because, you did have to go spend that money on Tyrus Thomas or Carlos Boozer, whoever it might be.
Well, I mean, Oklahoma City is a great example. CC would appreciate this because you have to spend 90% of the salary cap in the NBA. Mm-hmm. So for the Thunder, they didn't reach the floor this year. They're about $20 million below the floor. And what happens to that money is it gets divided amongst the players on your roster.
Oh, nice.
So they're all getting like a $2 million, like a $1.5 to $2 million bonus for not reaching the floor. So you're right. I mean, once the calendar year flips, like it just starts again, right? So that money, the savings doesn't carry over to the following year.
Man, that is phenomenal.
CeCe's coming back. He as a power forward. That's it. He's made his decision.
Could you imagine the A's having to like divvy up that money if you had a floor? They got a $20 million. They got a $20 million roster. They got to give $80 million to the rest of their players.
Could you imagine if you're in that Oklahoma City roster and like Sam Presti, their general manager, comes right at the trade deadline and is like, yeah, we're going to go out and sign a $20 million guy. There'd be like a revolt there, right? As far as like, this money that's now lost.
Oh my gosh. Bobby, there's so many things we could ask you. Just real quick, Just one or two more before we let you run here. And thank you for giving us all this time at a busy time for you, obviously. Jalen Brunson. It looks, we're recording this, Wednesday around, the early afternoon, and obviously Thursday at 6 p.m. things can become official. It looks like he's going to go to the Knicks, right? They cleared all this space. His dad's an assistant there. It looks like somewhere around like 4 years and 110 million are the numbers being talked about.
Leon's his former agent. Leon's son's is
right.
now agent. We can keep on going.
It's all connected. What do you now? Look, this is a winning type dude, right?
Yeah.
Like, and he balled out in the playoffs too when he was asked to carry a load.
Yeah.
What do you? What do you think about that? Like, because I don't think anybody was thinking of him in this stratosphere financially, but what do you think about just the move to bring him in and sort of his value?
Yeah, I mean, and CC knows this. Like, we could put numbers at guys, but the market dictates what you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say I could say that Jalen's a $20 million guy and he should be getting paid like Fred VanVleet in Toronto, right? 4 for 85. But as you know, all it takes is one team.
Yeah.
And the market dictates it. So if you're New York and your goal was to kind of build this roster, I mean, you've done it a little bit through the draft and then go out and add a big free agent here. And then this is not a great class overall. I think the center position is a little more deep. Point guards are not. It's Jalen, basically Tyus Jones and in Memphis as your two core guys. Then go out and if it's going to cost you 27 and you had budgeted 24, what's another $3 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he's a heck of a player. I mean, he's fearless, he's tough, he'll be great in New York. I mean, these people will love him. I think everyone will look at like, oh my God, 4 years, $110 million. Like once you start playing and you're winning games, like that contract doesn't mean anything, right? Like that just goes, I mean, if you're struggling, then you're like, oh my God, we're stuck with this,
Yeah.
So I think for New York, I think he's a heck of a player. I think certainly that's a position of need. You still have RJ and Julius. I think Mitchell Robinson probably comes back, I would say. You still have your younger players with Quickly and Obi. I think the interesting thing will be here is, and this is kind of like a little bit of a salary cap detail, like the Knicks can go into this where they'd have to have the Mavericks agree to do a sign and trade with Brunson to New York. And basically the Knicks can operate as a team over the salary cap, right? It would basically be tied into the players that are going to the Pistons, Noel and Burks. So they can basically act as a team over the salary cap. And what that would do is that could preserve them one of these bigger mid-level exceptions. They can go out and get a $10.5 million guy to add with Brunson. I think that, the Mavericks would have to cooperate. I don't know if we're at that point. I don't know if Mark Cuban's going to want to cooperate right now but they would get a trade exception out of it. So we were talking about that earlier. Like now they create a trade exception that they would have available to use for a whole year. So I think it's a good deal for Brunson. I think it's a good deal from New York. I know they got crushed during the draft as far as them moving out of 11. For me, it was always like, all right, let's wait. Like, let's see what the next, it's always a next move to things. Like, I mean, we're so like reactionary to things. And I think, for me, I did Scott Van Pelt that night and I just said like, hey, we did see teams build their rosters more organically in Golden State and Boston through the draft here. Yep. But trust me, man, like it's hard. It's like you just run out of patience sometimes. Like sometimes you got to you got to be a little more aggressive. You can't, you're not going to hit on all your draft picks. You're not going to hit on Steph Curry and Clay and Draymond and have Poole develop or Tatum and Brown and all those guys there. So, I understand it here because as you said, like, it's not like, 26 million is going to carry over to next year. Now you're going to have, 52 million and it doubles here. So, I think it's a good move for New York. It's costly. But I do think he fits I think he fits Tibbs to a T.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll be interesting taking him away from Luka and but we saw him play in that Utah series, the first, 3 games without Luka, man. He was one of the best players on the court here. So, I get it. I understand as far as, what New York is doing.
All right, Bobby, we'll get you out of here on this time of year. You have carved out, I think, your own unique place in sports television. You're sort of one of one in what you do and what you can bring to the table. And actually, see, I feel like one of Bobby's first media appearances after he left the Nets, he did a couple shows with me at ESPN Radio. I think that was right. That was
you and Ian O'Connor.
Yes. And that's right. You were doing shows with Ian too. And we were like, oh, wait, this guy's like really good at media. Like this is gonna work out. But it's awesome. And for me, I love it as a viewer because it's just like something you can only get from your perspective. Bobby, how about just like your enjoyment this time of year doing what you do now on TV versus what it was like being in a front office at this time of year?
Well, I was going to say I sleep a lot better, but man, I'm not sleeping at all right now. So I'll sleep. Well, I mean, I love this time of year and being in the front office, especially the draft. It's like kind of like working on Wall Street as far as all the action, but I can get the same rush, I guess, work doing the draft at ESPN or doing free agency during the whole day here. You do miss the team part of it, right? Like, as CC can say, like being in the locker room, being part of being part of, you're building something, right? Like you're just part of like the camaraderie where you're a little bit more of like kind of like an independent contractor to say like I will. And it's, funny every year I've been doing it. Like you kind of go through a little bit of a withdrawal when I get home. It's an adjustment period where like, you haven't seen your wife for 3 weeks. You haven't seen your kids for 2 weeks. You've done such this routine where I'm waking up at 5 a.m. I'm here till 12:30, right? I'm basically doing TV. I'm writing and stuff like where I'm blocking out the real world of everything, right? Which I can do. But when I get home and it'd be like, okay, can you go to Publix and do food shopping? And I'd be like, huh?
What?
Like we got to go to my mom's for dinner tonight. What? Like, so you just have to get back to like, so you got to get back to planet Earth. But I mean, I love what I do. I mean, I think I've gotten better. Like I don't read social media anymore. I try not to. Like
Smart.
I don't read comments. I don't read comments. I don't read I try not to interact with that many people here. Like I think TV wise, it's certainly just kind of always you just get better. Like I always say, like try to use the analogy of like an athlete. Like I'm going to go on TV and 30 minutes here, and it might be the first time somebody's ever watched me do TV. So I got to be like my A game, right? Like I don't care if I'm talking about the Knicks for the 6th time, or like. And then I always say, like, dude, like I try never to turn down anything request wise because like I never know I'll never be asked back again. So like I will try to I'll be as accommodating and everything. But I do love this time of year. I love going out to summer league and seeing all the guys I used to work with and all the different teams and stuff like that. But I don't have to worry about a guy getting injured or our summer league team 0-6 and our president is like, man, these guys you drafted stink, So there is an outlet to that. Yeah.
Bobby,
no, that's great.
We so appreciate the time, man. Like C and I, in addition to me working in the sport, we're just such big hoops fans, and so to get to talk with you on this particular day is just awesome for us. Not to mention, I just love seeing your success, man. Congrats on your new contract as well.
Thank you.
Well deserved. And good luck surviving and sleeping over the next few days, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, you got it, Bobby. Thank you, man.